Test, test. 1, 2. Of the things we know, science is the measure. But of the things which hold humans at perplexity and bemusement, philosophy is a blank map. A way of openly traversing a confusing world with mysteries deeper than the Earth's crust and more vast than the darkness of space. Socrates and Plato, two staunch proponents of the utilization of philosophy in search of true knowledge, also known as techne, are arguably two of the most renowned philosophers to this day. Even after thousands of years, they are still mentioned frequently in contemporary classrooms, and their methods of inquiry, like the Socratic method or Olympus, are ingrained in many of our academic institutions. Although Socrates has no personal written work according to current records, his and Plato's motives and desires can be rationally inferred when viewing Plato's writings in extant. Their motives and desires seem to be directly linked to a search for techne or true knowledge, especially in virtues such as piety, justice, fortitude, and so on. This is because a techne is that which can be fully articulated and defined by an individual who embodies it and has the ability to teach it to others. In other words, one cannot fully know something if they only know a part of it, and Socratic intellectualism suggests that to be X is to know X, and if someone embodies something and truly understands it, they will be able to teach it to another individual via demonstration, explanation, and so on. Thus, if a virtue is a techne or this true knowledge, it would be the case that someone would be an expert of a given virtue, be the virtue they are an expert of, and be able to teach it to another individual. This would, of course, all be good news, as a wise individual would likely desire to live in a society with those who are as virtuous as possible, right? Yet, in many of Plato's writings, evidence of virtues actually being techne is left to be desired. Instead, Socrates seemingly utilizes the Socratic Olympus as a cudgel to beat and tear apart the other interlocutor's arguments, causing aporia, or this internal sense of contradiction and confusion. Afterwards, Socrates provides little to no commentary of that which he thinks X virtue is. For instance, in Plato's text Euthyphro, Socrates discusses piety with an individual named Euthyphro. Plato has very original titles, by the way. I know. Euthyphro claims to be an expert of the virtue piety. In their time period, this virtue was utilized when describing actions that were considered pleasing to the gods, or God loved, or, well, maybe we can't fully define the term, which will be a problem as we see in a moment. From a surface view, three things are primarily gained from their conversation. First, Euthyphro provides 5 arguments conveying what he believes piety is, which all fail upon Socrates' further investigation, causing this phenomena of aporia. Second, one of the 5 arguments provided by Euthyphro gives rise to a famous dilemma known as the Euthyphro dilemma. Gosh, philosophers are the most creative with these names. I know. Finally, the reader is left with a sense of ambiguity regarding that which fully is piety. Although I could spend time talking about these 5 posed definitions which Euthyphro provides of what piety is, or even talking about the Euthyphro dilemma, there is already great talk of this in other literature. Rather, I would like to explore several of the questions which have arisen in my mind as I've read more and more written works by Plato, like Euthyphro. Here are 2 such questions I find myself thinking about now quite often. First, what is the overarching goal or purpose of philosophy? And second, can virtue ever be understood as true knowledge or this techne? Well, when thinking about the first question, I feel a sense of visceral puzzlement. As an individual who has almost finished one of my majors, philosophy, I've had several notions of the purpose of philosophy for a long time. In fact, the purpose I have given philosophy is found in the beginning of this video. I view philosophy as a way of inquiring or searching for truth in a sea of uncertainty. But I also pair searching with mutual argumentation. For instance, if I do not understand what consciousness is, typically I would not only ask, questions about consciousness, but synthesize a general argument of what I believe it to be. From there, I may modify my beliefs and arguments according to the information provided by another individual's argument. In other words, a philosophical dialogue would ensue between multiple parties. But Socrates is not illustrated as arguing in this manner. Instead of overtly attempting to find out that which is true knowledge, or what exists, or even what an objective reality may be, he instead shows the logical inconsistencies of another's argument with no counter-argument of his own, at least in many instances. In other words, he illuminates what we don't know. It is actually deeply ironic to me that one of the most astute arguers I have ever read has, in a sense, proved that him and those around him know little to nothing about objective reality or this true knowledge, or techne, so to speak. A man of knowledge, Socrates knows nothing. Of course, there's utility in the epiphany of one's ignorance. Yet, that is a topic for another time. That said, is virtue amongst the things which can be understood as a techne? This is a difficult question. Different virtues do seem to exist in a ubiquitous manner. There is also a general shared understanding of what composes each virtue. For instance, imagine someone who is just. You are probably envisioning someone who is acting in a morally right and fair manner. Imagine someone who has fortitude. You probably picture someone who is acting courageously in the face of inestimable adversity. But there seems to be an aspect of relativity entangled with morality, one not difficult to picture with enough thought. For instance, maybe someone has true fortitude if they get an abortion in a society that deems it taboo and repugnant to do so. Or maybe they have true fortitude if they choose not to get an abortion, even if they are really scared of motherhood, in a society which legally allows the access of such a utility. Think of practices such as female genital mutilation, or FGM, which are practiced amongst several cultures. Many argue you must be culturally relative and respect this practice amongst other practices in other cultures, for instance. Others argue that FGM is objectively wrong, morally wrong, in fact. Maybe they would state that it is not just to hurt others, but then they would need to fully understand what is and is not just. But no one seems to have an objective answer with empirical evidence. I mean, they could state that those who are just do not harm others, but harm reduction is seemingly impossible, as me simply consuming oxygen equates to the stealing of your air resources and producing carbon dioxide in oxygen's wake. Morality is not like math. It is not an exact science. And even if religion sets some precedent for what equates to a virtue, you have issues like the Euthyphro dilemma. For instance, in the 10 Commandments, murder is stated to be wrong. God says murder is wrong because it's wrong, or murder is wrong because God says it is. In this case, morality is either completely independent of God, which seems silly and foolish to argue for, or morality is arbitrary. That said, Plato's writings do highlight many interesting concepts in philosophy, and it highlights a really unique way of conducting philosophy. Each text seems to beg the question of what humans truly know, and you, the reader, are left in the vastness of uncertainty, mystified. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something about philosophy in general and Plato and Socrates, two renowned philosophers. If you like this video, you should subscribe. This was technically for an honors project, but I plan on making more philosophy videos just like this. Thank you, and have a beautiful day.
As long as we're moving, I don't care if we're lost. Eyes bleeding shots, 5 o'clock in the morning. Mind in the sky, and the night got storms. Keep waking up, and it's tough when you're lonely. Tough when it's closer to home.